Our first speaker, Principal Advisor for AI and Biostatistics at SAS, Dr. John Gottula. He is a farmer from Nebraska. Now, Artificial Intelligence Advisor at SAS and Analytics Teacher at North Carolina A&T. John's current project include animal antimicrobial resistance management, analyzing American dietary patterns, and assessing the efforts of biotech on developing economics. When he's not working, he loves forestry, he's a girl dad, and get this is not a joke, actually. He plays rancheras on his Tejano accordion. We should talk because I do believe we have an opening in our Minced Dill cover band for an accordion. You're like, thank you. This is like divine right here. All right, John, come on up.
Well, thank you very much. And it's an honor to be here. And it's just wonderful that we have this resource here in RTP. It made all of the difference when I moved here in 2014. And it really reminds me of like being in Silicon Valley, having a resource like this, a place like this where we can come to, where we can meet each other, where we can collaborate, except the people are nice. All right. So what do you do for a living? No, seriously, this is a networking event. I need a volunteer. What do you do for a living? What's that? Journalist. Thank you. Education research. Excellent. What's that? Auditing. Very good. These things capture the breadth of what we do in RTP. Things that are high-tech, quality-focused, fact-driven. Thank each of you for the work that you do to make RTP what it is. One thing I didn't hear, farm labor. Who here is a hoe hand? No? Because when you look at most of the individuals depicted on King Knox's tomb, they are removing weeds, whether behind a plow of an ox, whether removing trees to clear land, or whether using a hoe ahead of someone sowing seeds. In fact, throughout human history, the number one expenditure of labor has been in the weeding of crops in fields. This is a scene that is still common today in many parts of the world, including in the United States, including in areas with high value or horticultural crops, where people tend the crops by hand. Now, like many of you today, I work in a cushioned, air-conditioned office building, and it's absolutely wonderful. But I have been in a setting like this before. Who here has been in a setting that looks like this in your life? Quite a few. I'd say about a quarter of this audience for those of you online. About a quarter of us have been in this setting before. And I tell you, for those of you who haven't yet been in this setting, because one day we may very well return to this, for those of you who haven't yet been in this setting, it really puts it in perspective when you're at the end of a hoe, at the end of a long row, with 100 more rows to go, out under the hot sun. It's amazing the things you wish for. Like, what do you wish for in your office job, right? You might wish for a promotion. You might wish for a more relaxed timeline. You might wish for a better manager. When I was out here, working in a research setting, yes, but still hard labor nonetheless, I remember wishing for a cloud. It's true. Yet, the fact that we are not doing this job, that we have the choice of a vocation and an occupation to not do that, is a testament to choices we have made as a society to be able to do other things. After all, it wasn't that long ago that the majority of people were involved in farm labor. Today, only 1.3% of Americans are doing farm labor every day. Yet, those of our grandparents or great-grandparents' generation, chances are more likely than not that they were directly involved in farm labor. So how can fewer and fewer of us continue to do the labor that allow so many minds and so many hands to continue doing all of these other wonderful RTP-related things? It's because we've gotten more productive with the land that we have. This total factor productivity is a measure of the output per unit of land, labor, and capital expenditures on farms. We're not taking any land out of production or into production net. All of the arable land that can be used is being used in the United States on net balance. So how are we extracting more output per unit of land and especially per unit of labor to be able to free us to make choices to be able to do things like quality assurance or journalism or, in my case, agricultural data science? Well, over time, this productivity has continued to increase. And by the way, in North Carolina, we are much more productive than we used to be. I know someone else in RTP who's an old head around here, and maybe my good friend Kelly has heard this story. He went to NC State in the 1960s, learned about an herbicide called 2,4-D, brought it back to the farm in Lucama, and it changed the course of his family's farming life because he was able to control the morning glories that just were recalcitrant to the hoe. That is what increases productivity. Herbicides, pesticides, new varieties of crops, mechanization. You add all of that on top of the water, soil, and sunlight that we are blessed with in North Carolina. And as a kid from Nebraska, I can tell you we get a lot of rain here. Our productivity outpaces the rest of the United States and will continue to do so through 2040 at least, by my projections. Now, I mentioned pesticides. Those include herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides. And because we have a warm and wet climate here in North Carolina, we need a lot of those. But as you can see here, our pesticide use is net stable or perhaps going down. Why is that? It not only has to do with chemistry, but it has to do with biology and mechanization. Biology, things like planting cover crops to suppress the weeds under, in this case, the soybean, to keep those weed seeds from germinating. Or plasticulture, in this case in a strawberry field, again, to suppress weeds. I cannot emphasize how important weed suppression is to be able to give us the choice to do the vocations that we want and live our lives. It's not only about hand weeding now, but it's about chemical, biological, and mechanical weed suppression technologies. And then in addition, my work with Dr. Greg Goins at A&T and NC State as well is also helping advance precision agriculture, adding data and AI as a synergistic factor to all of these technologies. That's my day job. That's exactly what I do. So that we bring all of these things together. When you garden and you see a malady, and for those of you who haven't got your hands dirty, who don't have this hands-on experience, I would encourage you to do so. We have dozens of community gardens available to us in the Triangle. You're going to see powdery mildew of cucurbits. You're going to see aphids on your brassicas. You're going to have Johnson grass to pull, and you're going to see nutrient deficiencies on your raspberry. You are going to realize that all of these maladies have a cure and a cure at hand so that we are not experiencing famine. which is a blanket statement that can be applied worldwide anywhere that is not experiencing a war zone. So that we can all eat like pharaohs and sit like one too. Thank you.
I did fail to mention in my big intro that we do Q&A after each presenter. So if you do have questions, there will be someone running a mic around to ask questions. I have one for you.
Yes, please.
While we're getting that, what are some of the challenges that growers face in taking advantage of new data technologies like AI?
Most growers, we always hear about the corporatization of farming, and that's true. Larger corporate growers are acquiring more land and building businesses. But actually, nationwide, 70% of farms are small farms. They're like my dad, just a few acres. He has a high school education. He can't write code or design an app, right? So there's a lack of an ability to adopt some of the advanced and often expensive computer software and cloud computing, and many of you know more about this than I, on such a small scale business. In fact, for most small farms, most of the revenue of small farms comes from off farm. The spouse working in town as a nurse or a bookkeeper or something like that to be able to help keep that family farm afloat. So adopting AI, it's about the least of their concerns beyond just keeping the weeds down.
Thank you for the engaging talk. You mentioned that the pesticide use in North Carolina on net has gone down. What do you attribute that to? What's replaced pesticides, and has it affected yield?
Yes. So one large share of the reduction in pesticide use since the 1990s has been the introduction of crops that are resistant to insect pests. And so for many crops, corn, soybean, and cotton, we no longer have to spray insecticides throughout the season like we used to. These crops are Bt crops. Bt is a bacterium that kills caterpillars and beetles and other chewing or sucking or rasping insects. And we have encoded that gene into our crops so that the crops are natively resistant to these insects. The insects drop dead after a few hours of feeding, and therefore we don't have to spray pesticides, which are generally of a higher toxicology profile. It's kind of a win-win situation.
A wonderful talk. Thank you so much. I am curious about every single, animal organism fits into a niche, Is there any consequences to, eradication of pests, whether they're herbicidal, insecticidal? What balance is affected by the success of your work and obviously the success of agriculture in general? How does that fit into the broader context of our ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer, I call myself a biostatistician, as it depends, right? My typical hedgy answer, it depends. Any of you heard that before? Anyone work in clinical trials? It depends, written the protocol. Agriculture is inherently disruptive on the native ecosystem. It's just a question of disruptive for what and to what extent. And there are some environments that are certainly biodiversity hotspots that are absolutely more susceptible than others. And so you compare an environment like the Nebraska prairie with a relatively limited species ecosystem versus the Sahel in Brazil, Mato Grosso, or going into Amazonas. there's certainly a lot more biodiversity in tropical or subtropical regions. And not to mention, because plants require warm days and cool nights for optimal carbon synthesis, for optimal photosynthesis respiration balance, the more that we plant our crops in environments that are like the prairie with warm days and cool nights rather than just hot all the time like a rainforest, the higher productivity we get. And so when considering the balance of needing to feed ourselves and our livestock and supply the fiber that we need and quality of life goods like wine and certainly CBD is way up there, right? There are many crops that we grow for fun and pleasure too. When considering that balance, we certainly would want to orient more of our agriculture to the least disruptive ecosystems. Yeah, thanks for the question.
If there's one more, if you could speed lightning, maybe saw a hand, one more? All right, speed, we've got 1 minute. Speed lightning, quick answer.
Thanks for the talk. I'm a product of one of those small family farms that you mentioned. What can we do as a tech industry to enable those small family farms to take advantage of the advances in AI and technology and things to help them just imbue those operating procedures into their farms and take advantage of it if they're not, a corporate farm that has unlimited resources, so to speak?
Yeah, let me ask a follow-up to that, if I may. Where does the proprietor of the family farm go for information? When the proprietor needs a trusted advisor, who do they turn to for information today aside from AI?
Well, I've been out of it for 40 plus years. So when I was in it, it was granddad or a neighbor or an uncle or something, right?
Yeah.
So it was tribal knowledge type stuff.
Right.
Today, I would imagine it's just Google searching or whatever. But
Sure.
A lot of those small family farms you mentioned, especially in rural areas where I'm originally from, are not savvy typically on being able to find that information on their own.
Yeah. I mean, I think ChatGPT and LLMs have done a lot to democratize AI, right? And I mean, I work in AI every day. I see the problematic nature of some of these technologies, but let's be honest. ChatGPT scores over 90% on the Certified Crop Consultant Advisors exam, where 70% is required to pass, right? And so there is certainly something to be said about the technologies that are available to the public today to be able to fill in some of those gaps. Just don't check your brain at the door. The other thing I would mention is there's a critical role still of cooperative extension, providing their knowledge and their insight, which they have for 150 years as who I believe are the most trusted advisors of farmers, and being able to bring the insights of AI through that existing platform within those existing relationships.